Coming up next on Rugby Wrap-Up, USA Rugby head coach Gary Gold. Rugby Wrap-Up brought to you in part by Irish Rugby Tours, The Balanced Palate, Nutrition for Peak Performance, AFIA Sports Training Group, and The Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street in New York City. Hey everybody, welcome back to Rugby Wrap-Up. Matt McCarthy and Steve Lewis in the Fantasy Sports Network studios in Midtown Manhattan talking rugby. And Steven, we have a special guest with us, don't we?
Yes, we do.
We have Mr. Gary Gold, the head coach of Team USA. And Gary, it's great to have you in here, and Happy New Year.
Thank you very much. Happy New Year to you guys as well. Thanks for having me.
You know, Gary, we've had to keep you out of the studio for quite some time because Steve is Scottish, and you guys did beat Scotland.
I believe we did, yeah. I believe we did.
But we'll get to that later.
We'll get to that later. By the way, fellow coaches, you guys know that the first thing that happens when you get a head coaching job is that you know that you're probably going to get fired, so you have to enjoy the accolades while you can. Our fellow coach Steve Lewis just won an accolade, senior men's coach for sevens in the United States of America.
Now, it doesn't distinguish, but actually it was mostly sevens this year, yeah.
But it's just
senior coach of the year, yeah.
Senior men's coach of the year, awarded at the NDS this last weekend.
Yes,
that's correct.
Yeah, so
that's
kudos
correct.
to you. That's two.
Thank you.
2 out of the last 4.
2 of the last 4.
So you, Spencer Tracy, and Tom Hanks, 2-time,
and Joe Smith,
and Josh.
yes, 2-time Oscar winners. Absolutely, there's a few of us.
2-time Oscar winners for 300, Alex. But coach, for the folks that don't know you at home, you are the head coach of Team USA's Men's Eagles program, which are right now ranked 12th in the world, if I'm not mistaken.
That's correct.
Uncharted waters.
2018, I think, was a terrific year. As we said, 12th is the highest USA's ever been ranked. So kudos to you, your coaching staff, and the players, and a terrific 2018. But it's 2019. Teeing you up.
He's tough.
Fine, he's been winding me up for long enough now. I can take it.
So tell us about 2019. What's it looking like? It's a World Cup year for you, obviously.
Yeah. Just really exciting. Really exciting times. I mean, one of the biggest issues about having a reasonably successful year is that the pressure's on you. The following year. They say in cliches that it's reasonably simple to enjoy a little bit of success at some stage. The real difficult part is when you have to start to repeat that success. So, one of the things we spoke about as a coaching group this last weekend when we assembled was that we're going to be the team that everybody wants to beat now. Certainly from an ARC point of view, ARC is going to be a fantastic opportunity for us because it's quite genuinely going to be the groundwork for our Rugby World Cup preparation. We're going to hopefully get, for a large period of time of the ARC, we're going to have a lot of the guys that are going to be involved in Rugby World Cup. And for that period of time, I think, the 5 or 6 weeks that we're together, we're going to have to put a lot of hard work in and continue to grow on what we did last year. But, knowing full well that, Brazil are a completely different entity as a team. Argentina is not going to, is not going to be an easy ride. And, last year we saw that even Uruguay had a couple of pretty good performances. So they're going to come here in the Rugby World Cup year a lot more improved as well. So it's going to be a big challenge. And obviously, dare I say it, Canada have started improving now as well and started playing well. So we've got Canada in Seattle, which is just down the road, for nearly practically a home game for them. Officially, it is actually a home game for them. So, we've got a lot of work cut out for us this year, and then obviously onto the PNC in July, and then from there, Okinawa, here we come.
So just to clarify the schedule for 2019, as you've said, we have 5 games in the ARC coming up. That's February and March. So that's 5 games over a 6-week period. It's a pretty long tour, almost. Well, half away, half home. You then go Pacific Nations, so we'll be playing Canada and Denver, Fiji in Fiji, Samoa in Fiji.
I believe it's Japan and Samoa in Fiji.
Japan and Samoa, okay.
Japan and Samoa in Fiji, which will really be a good test for us. I mean, Japan are a quality outfit, as we all know the history of what happened with them in the last Rugby World Cup. They've really continued to improve under Jamie Joseph and Tony Brown, and they're gonna be a real handful for us. They pose a slightly different threat. They pose a threat from an attacking threat point of view and a work rate point of view. They're a very hard-working rugby team. So we're going to have a lot of challenges laid out to us this year. And then just before then, Steve, we play Australia in a warm up game on the West Coast, and then we head off to Japan.
Terrific. So, how soon is the Australia game after the Pacific Nations Cup? Is it tagged at the end, or is there a gap?
No, there's a gap, and then we play the Australia game, and then we've got 10 days before we leave. So it'll be we leave on the 16th of September, so it'll be at the beginning of September.
Terrific. And so from a selection point of view, you sort of intimated earlier you felt you'd have the majority of the guys you want for the World Cup in the ARC. You're trying to state something that's been, I think, a feature of your coaching over the last year has been a consistency in selection. So is it your intent to be consistent and remain consistent, your best 20, 25 guys? Or are there opportunities anywhere in these two playing windows where you're going to take a chance, bring someone in, take a look?
I think the answer is yes to both of them. So fundamentally, the first question that you asked is, yes, the large majority of the group is the group that's been tried and tested. Say the larger spine, it might be 22, it might be 25, but certainly, we could select 22, 23 players right now. And then there's another 7 or 8 spots that are available, and there we will be bringing in quite a lot of fresh blood over the period of the ARC, and we're going to have to experiment a little bit. We're going to have to understand what that may look like, particularly if we're going to be giving guys like David Arnui and Chance Wengleski opportunities to play during the ARC. It's exciting for us because they're young players. I mean, there's a wonderful crop of young players, all under the age of 22 years old, many of them have already been capped by the Eagles, and now what we want to do is we just want to get as much game time under their belt as possible and let them continue to grow and be backed by us as a coaching staff. So the answer is yes to both, Steve, but there won't be overall changes, no, not to the large majority of the squad.
And big guns, your European big guns. So will they get released, and for how long would they be released? So, for instance, you got AJ coming back, but he's not quite fit. I mean, he's not fully recovered from injury, is what I mean.
Right.
So, with regard to that, that's about you managing relationships with coaches in the UK?
Correct. Yeah. Correct. So, the ARC is a Reg 9 competition. By the letter of the law, the clubs are obliged to release all the players all of the time. But we really do want to build up a relationship, not only with the clubs in Europe, but also the MLR clubs here as well. So, it's been quite an extensive admin job between Dave Hodges and myself. We've reached out to all the players and all the coaches, and each single one of the scenarios is a slightly different scenario. So in case of AJ will come onto stateside a little bit earlier because Sale are in a position to release him. We'll do a full evaluation with him, with our strength and conditioning team, when Hugh Bevan moves down to Fort Lauderdale earlier. Hopefully, then AJ will pass. The reports are that he's looking good, and he'll come down to South America with us for the first 2 games, and then he'll return to Sale after that. But we're happy with that because then it gives us an opportunity. Will Hooley, on the other hand, the club in the UK, Bedford, have asked for Will to stay because they're in a cup competition. So it works for us if we can leave Will in the UK then, knowing that he's going to get some game time, and then when AJ goes back, Will comes in, and obviously we've got Will Maggie and we've got Ben Seema, and we've got a handful of guys that we can. So it's a good balance. It's a good balance. I'm certainly feeling a lot more comfortable with that situation this year than I am last year.
So, piggybacking on a couple of these points, how does your previous relationships, because you have a great resume, and a pretty full resume in different setups across the board, across the globe. How is it? Can you just pick up a phone and maybe call up a guy over at Worcester or at Sale and say, "Hey, can you help us?" Does it work that way at all? Those relationships?
Sure. I mean, ideally in the beginning, a lot of unions would just literally send out their Reg 9 letter. How that traditionally works, it goes through the channels, it'll go through USA Rugby. USA Rugby will write to the corresponding unions. In the case in the United Kingdom, it'll obviously be the RFU, and then it goes to Nigel Melville, and from Nigel he will send it out to the other clubs, to all the clubs that are relevant, and the club gets that information. But in our case, because the relationship, because the whole situation is very unique to USA Rugby, because we've got guys playing in 3-4 different countries, Australia, South Africa, New Zealand, France, and England, it's really important. We feel it's very, very important. It's something that Dave Hodges has driven really well. Is that we reach out to those individuals first and foremost before they get a regular 9 letter through the normal route. So between Dave and myself, we will write to the coach specifically on a personal level and just say, this is what we're thinking about. Please let us know if there's any views that you disagree with. And we do. We often get letters back and we get correspondence back saying, really happy that you can compromise. Can we compromise here or there? And unfortunately, sometimes you're going to have to make tough calls, particularly for us this year. I think going forward, we can be really lenient in 3 years. In a Rugby World Cup year is the year that we really do need to have a good group of guys assembled for a substantial period of time.
Before we take a break, we got to take a quick break. But just before I forget it, how important is winning in the ARC as much as it is getting players playing time and ready for the World Cup? Because last time I saw you was in Ireland. Mm-hmm. And in the press conference afterwards, you were pretty forthright saying, listen, we've got these young guys that we had valuable experience. And I thought you were getting buried by the press there about the drubbing. And I'm like, it was a number one team in the world against, at that point, I think we were 14 or 13, right? Mm-hmm. Or maybe, yeah. Is your vision still France more than it is, big bang wins in Japan?
There's no way, Maddie, as you said earlier, you don't, the life of a coach can go in a blink of an eye. I'm not contracted past 2019 Rugby World Cup, so obviously my focus is 2019 at the moment. Spent a year with the team, thoroughly enjoyed my time, absolutely love this group of players, and I think they can do special things. I do. I have a huge amount of faith in the players. I've not been able to say that about a lot of teams I've worked with, but there's just something about this group of players that I really enjoy. I think they are particularly committed, and they're committed to wanting to go places where maybe the Eagles have never been before. So obviously my focus at the moment now is 100% on 2019. Do I think potentially the Eagles can be more successful in 2023 than they may be in 2019? Yeah, I do, because I think the way things are changing at the moment now and the things that the organization want to do differently and keeping more continuity, not only with staff, but also with a playing group and the advent of the MLR and that getting stronger. I just think things are starting to fall into place a little bit better now that the experience of the group going to the 2019 World Cup can be substantially better and more, what's the word I suppose I'm looking for, more experienced. Really. Yeah, sure. And I mean, if you just want to look at it in one view, just look at the cumulative caps. I mean, during the course of the June series and leading into November series, cumulative caps that we had, we couldn't even get to 300 cumulative caps. I mean, teams that win Rugby World Cups are late 700s, early 800s cumulative caps. The All Blacks in the last Test match had 4 Centurion Rugby players. We need to be in a position where by 2023 we've got 4 to 5 guys who are 50 Test cap Eagles players, and hopefully by then maybe 1 or 2 or 100 Test cap.
Okay, we're going to take a quick break. We'll come back with Steve's question, and then we're going to talk a little bit more about the relationship with the MLR, Major League Rugby. We'll be right back.
If you're in New York City and want to watch some great rugby, have some great food, and some great times, go to the world's best rugby pub, the Pig and Whistle on West 36th Street. Ladies and gentlemen, every December, Rugby Wrap-Up's producer, Jonny Lewis, the mad Welshman, and his equally mad brother, Simon, attempt to get on Welsh TV. And as you can see, they get creative. This year, they went one better. They upped their game, and they did it at the Cardiff versus Dragons Guinness Pro 14 match at the famous Cardiff Arms Park, which coincidentally happened to be USA captain Blaine Scully's 50th match for the Cardiff Blues.
Good. Take a breath. Good, take a breath.
Anyway, Jonny and Simon being the one in the yellow and black stripes, begged, pleaded, and blagged their way onto the field for the halftime crossbar challenge, elbowing little kids and old ladies out of the way. Jonny, donning the powder blue, thought it was a corner flag challenge, apparently, with his lame attempt.
How's it feel? Useless. I've made a fool of myself.
And god-awful attempts at the posts aside, Simon managed to share the TV spotlight with the greatest, Gareth Edwards and Gethin Jenkins. Rest assured, Warren Gatland will not be calling Simon anytime soon. So after failing to win the crossbar challenge and the expensive watch, they didn't just exit the pitch. More egregious still, after failing to win the crossbar challenge and actually embarrassing themselves in it and failing to win the expensive watch, which was the award, they decided to play on the famous Cardiff Arms Park pitch and not noticing the fact that the players were back on for the second half of this Pro 14 game. Jonny and Simon Lewis were once again able to keep up their tradition of getting on Welsh TV during the annual Cardiff versus Dragons match. Kudos, boys, and we know that Blaine Scully is likely smiling at a coffee shop nearby.
That's what I'm talking about.
Poor Scully.
And we are back. Matt McCarthy, Steve Lewis, and Gary Gold, head coach of Team USA. Steve, you had a burning question that you wanted to ask before the break. Go ahead.
Burning question. So National Development Summit this last weekend, lots of seminars, and I was particularly struck with one, and that was Hugh Bevan, strength and conditioning, who is a relatively new to the team, or maybe 3-4 months now. So this is a highly decorated professional, you would say, who's come in and would appear he is very much in command of his facts. And I asked him and Greg afterwards, what's the sort of tussle about time in training? So here's a guy who's very insistent on the amount of time and the quality of reps and what you should be doing over the course of the week. And you have a skills coach who wants to do X. You maybe Sean Pittman wants to do Y. You're obviously the referee. How do you manage that tension between the coaches?
Oh, no, Steve, I wouldn't say it's a tension. As you know me well enough by now, I'm very much around facts, and I'm very much around the scientific evidence. I think this is the challenge where coaching is going at the moment now, because you do have almost this tug of war the whole time, where if I use Greg as an example, who's an attack coach and he's a skills coach, and he wants to command a team that are going to score tries and play attractive rugby and obviously look after the ball through phases, he's going to be very focused around the skill development, which is quite right. Hugh's role and responsibility is to make sure that the team are fit enough to be able to play that type of a game. So I think marrying the two is really where the answer is. And where that requires in some people's minds a little bit harder work, well, then so be it. But that's really what the requirement's taking at the moment now. The beauty with the answer to that question and the solution is that in any case, Greg would want the players to be skillful under pressure when they're fatigued in any case. So I don't think that that's too much of a challenging problem. It's a situation as a coach that requires thorough planning and a very good knowledge of the science and a very good understanding of the requirements of what both Greg and Hugh in this case and your example require. But I think once we understand what that is, so Hugh's would be about the composition of the session, the workload on the body, whether that's the physical workload or whether that's the cardiovascular workload or whether that's the speed workload, and Greg would be able to get what he wanted from a skills point of view. So in many ways, I actually think it's a better thing for a coach, because it puts us under pressure to not have this false dawn that Greg's running a skill session, for example, and it's an attack session, and we feel it looks really good, but it's not against opposition. They're not fatigued. They're not really getting challenged. And they find that the step up when they get into a game against better opposition is too big for them to be able to handle it.
Great. And one more coaching philosophy one before I turn you back. So you had mentioned during the course of the weekend at some stage, can't quite remember when, about not expecting someone to be able to perform on a Saturday, but they haven't performed the skill during practice. So with respect, my understanding is you like a few more collisions in training, a bit more contact. Mitch apparently was much more high-quality reps, less contact, and you are a believer in more contact because you can't do it on a Saturday, but you haven't done it on a Wednesday. Could you elaborate?
I don't necessarily want to categorize it as contact versus not contact. The wording I'd prefer to use is game-related training. So, and potentially, if we understand, and we do, what game related looks like from a numbers point of view. So we have a very good understanding in terms of what game related looks like in terms of meters per minute, the stress on the body, the amount of distance that the players are covering, the amount of times that they have up downs, the collisions that they have, the G-force on those collisions. Understanding what a game looks like, we actually really want to train at a higher level in that, but not for the same periods of time. Obviously, there's a balance there. So it's not for me just about do we want to do collisions or don't we do collisions. I'm very much more about us training in a game-related environment, or even tougher than what the game-related environment is, because then I feel that the transfer into the game is going to be a lot more realistic. And Steve, just to finish the point, I'm coached for many years against New Zealand teams, and unfortunately, I say this is many times at international rugby and even at Super Rugby level, I've gone into games and I felt that we've had a very good preparation. The minds are right for the guys, and we've gone in and we've literally just been blown off the field because the level of intensity is too high. And I have to look back at myself as a coach and go, I don't think I prepared the guys adequately, because whatever we did during the course of that week, or the weeks leading into it, or the preseason, that team were blown off the park. I don't think they were necessarily better rugby players on that particular day. I don't think they necessarily did anything with the ball in hand that we couldn't do. They could just do it for a longer period of time at a much higher intensity. So that's the reason why, for me, from a logical point of view, and from what I read and I believe the science is, you need to train in game-related situations.
Great.
I don't think they feed the families of the All Blacks if they lose. I think that's what hangs over their heads, right? I mean, but it seems to be the rest of the world is starting to catch up a little bit. You had the November test. You had the All Blacks on the ropes. They did pull out the wins. A couple of wins, and Ireland beat them. So anyway,
everyone's getting better, right? It was also said at the weekend, every country's getting better. Everybody's working, trying to improve. It's just who's getting better at getting better.
Yes, exactly.
Right. Okay, so let's segue into, because we're running out of time. I know you got to go, and you're kind of in town. You're gonna hit a Rooney, a Rugby United New York training session.
That's right. Yeah, I'm hoping to catch up with the guys this evening. We're due to go to a training session there, and then heading up to Boston in the next couple of days, and going down to New Orleans early next week. So I want to get in as much time with the major league clubs as we possibly can before we hit the ground running ourselves.
We have a head coach of Team USA going all these different things, and that's number one. And number two, you have these things to go to. You have the ARCs, the America's Rugby Championship. You have Major League Rugby, the MLR. Now, there are those out there that are worried that this is going to hurt the MLR in a way, in terms of players being taken away for the national team. But this is the nature of the beast in world rugby, and professional leagues all know about this.
Yes, that's true. That's one way of looking at it. In saying that as well, it doesn't necessarily need to be like that. And I say that because I believe they're looking at it. But there's Major League Rugby, and it only goes on for a certain period of time, and it's not an incredibly long period of time. It's not as long as the English Premiership or the top 14. And so therein lies an opportunity for me, because we don't need to be playing MLR and ARC at the same time. Right. There's enough time in the year. Yeah. We should be playing MLR, in my opinion, and leaving the players at those clubs and letting them play there week in and week out, and letting the clubs feel that they're getting value for money on the players. And then let's play the international window at another time of the year, because the problem is from August, September, and not this year because it's a Rugby World Cup year. In a normal year, everybody's upset because nobody's playing rugby. So I'm not happy with the preparation pre-November because no one's playing rugby. The MLR clubs aren't happy because their players aren't getting to play at that time of year. So I think those are solutions that are being worked through at the moment. I'm very, very positive about the leadership of the group of people who are making those decisions, and I think ultimately that's where we're going to get to in a very short period of time, hopefully in a few short years.
Well, I think one of the questions for the MLR folks is that they don't want to compete head-on with one of the major sports here in America, and this kind of window, it falls at the end of the NFL season. Sure, the Super Bowl is in that window. Would you move the ARC, or would you move the MLR schedule?
Probably move the ARC to post-July, only because I have another train of thought around about that, and that would be that down in the Southern Hemisphere, they're playing the Rugby Championship at the same time. So, and then it would make sense that there's that much Test match rugby around the world almost at the same time. So maybe I'm still thinking with trying to go the the route of a global season, which I know is way off. And
Global calendar question.
yeah, there's too many. There's too many.
Two-segment show.
There's too many people who there's too many issues around that at the moment. But I think from our point of view, I would leave the MLR here now, and I'd move the ARC at a late stage. I will say as well, though, that again, it's a bit of a balancing act, and I feel that with all the best respect in the world, I'm not necessarily sure that rugby is going to suffer because you happen to be playing at the same time as the NBA or the NFL or NHL. I just think to be playing rugby and having an organization that makes a lot of sense and everybody can play at the same time is more important than worrying about whether you're playing at the same time of a major league sport. But I'm not an expert in that, and I need to admit that. It's just my personal gut feel is, we need the relationship between the national team and the major league rugby clubs. It's more important for me that we keep growing that going forward, and everybody gets to play, and everybody seems to have a rugby global season that works for everybody.
The ugliest word in world rugby, calendarization. It's come into vogue lately as a grammar Nazi. I just don't think it's a word. But it kind of sums this up. It's what is the global calendar? What is the annual calendar? Is there too much rugby? What works best for American rugby? So all valid points.
So you've got specific players that I wanted to talk about. One of them is Samu Manoa, right? Just released from Cardiff. I think they called it a compassionate release or something along those lines to be with his. He's got some family stuff. Is he still in the pool for the Eagles?
Sure, no question of a doubt about it. Yeah, we've been chatting to Samu. I mean, physically he's in good shape, as you say. He's spending some time with his family at the moment now, which is important and it's great. And I think he's really happy to be back with the family. There's some really exciting rugby opportunities for him at this moment in time. I think he's got a couple of options on the plate for himself at the moment. But from an Eagles point of view, Samu's a big part of us, and he's one of the guys who was fantastic. Certainly for me as a new coach, to be able to lean on a senior player of his magnitude, his leadership within the group was fantastic. His relationship towards myself and the coaching group was wonderful. And Steve will tell you as a coach, I mean, we need the players more than they need us. And don't be fooled about that. The coach doesn't have as much influence as what people think out there. And, when you've got senior players like...
Don't let on.
When you've got senior players like Blaine and Nate and Samu and Mikey Ter, and the list goes on, who are so willing to work with the coaching group, it makes our lives a lot easier.
Yeah, and perhaps it gives a guy like this who's a banger. He's up front and physical all the time. A much needed break, maybe a mental break as well.
Sure. I mean, Samu's come off the back of a couple of very long seasons. The English Premiership when he was at Northampton and the French Top League is tough rugby. It's week in, week out, tough rugby for a very long period of time. And when you get to your mid-30s, it takes its toll on you after a while, especially when you're a big guy. And his attribute is his physicality. So I think this could really work well for him. I mean, he also had a little bit of an issue, if you remember, in November with his knees. So his knees had an opportunity to settle down a bit now. I believe he's working really hard on his fitness. And as you say, clear head, happy to be with the family. And, our last correspondent's really excited to be back in the Eagles group as soon as possible.
And I just wanted to give a shout out to Seamus Kelly because Seamus recently announced his retirement from rugby for a back injury. Yeah. He was on the World Cup team in 2015. He was looking to play with Rugby Union in New York. And he was another tough as nails kid. Yeah,
and that was sad as well because Seamus was certainly somebody, when we heard that he was going to be involved with Rooney, we were excited to see what that might look like. So it's never nice to see a player retire. I think Steve's still in mourning about the news of Andy Murray. So I think the British Andy Murray when he won, only Scottish successful sportsman, I believe, ever of all time.
The only? Did you say? The most I will accept. Final question, ARC squad announcement, when are you letting the public know, or is it...
When is the Rugby Wrap-Up exclusive coming out about the squad announcement?
I think we can give you an exclusive, guys. I think the squad's already been announced. Steve, unfortunately, has been celebrating his award for so long that he hasn't been checking in with the media at the moment. Now, I think the squad's going to be announced, I believe, by the end of this week.
Excellent.
On that note, I want to thank Mr. Gary Gold for coming in, and of course, the two-time senior men's national champion, trophy winning.
You need to do that
coach.
one again.
What is it? Just you say it.
Senior coach of the year.
Senior coach of the year. It just rolls right off his tongue. You know, when you get used to it, it's not easy. I've never won anything like that. But in all seriousness, congratulations. Thank you for coming in. Matt McCarthy for Mr. Gary Gold and Mr. Steve Lewis at the Fantasy Sports Network, Studio 34 in Midtown Manhattan, talking rugby. And we're signing off.